In today's episode, we're going to be doing part 2 of the CDP framework, where we're going to walk you through some real life examples of how making better choices, making better decisions, and developing better patterns can ultimately benefit you. Welcome back to another episode of the Upgrade My Rituals podcast. My name is Kevin McKellar, the host of the show, and this is the place to be for getting yourself that much more productive in a holistic fashion. Whether you are an entrepreneur, solopreneur, you are a executive, some type of professional who is looking to design your day so instead of trying to develop 27 new different habits, you have this really great ideal day that even if we come close to executing, your head hits the pillow at the end of the night and you feel great about what you accomplished that day and where your life is headed. And that's a lot. A lot of that takes a lot of choices that you're presented with, a lot of good decisions that you have to make, and patterns that develop from that. And of course, this is part 2 of the CDP framework. So what we did last episode, if you didn't listen to episode 60, we went through the CDP framework and how it's really laid out. And ultimately, if you go through ritual design, you have your year set, your quarter set. Every week is laid out to hit your goals and your domains, and every day is planned to the T. And then we're not executing, right? It comes down to 3 things: the choices that you have, the decisions that you make, and the patterns that develop. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, I would definitely highly suggest check out episode 60 so you have some more context. And of course, before I forget, this is perfect timing because this is the end of the year. Tomorrow is the 31st, I believe. And this is a perfect time to ultimately go through and take a look at what choices you've been presented with and what kind of decisions you've been making and what kind of new decisions you may want to be making for this year. So I hope you had a great holiday season. I hope you're planning on having some fun tomorrow. Be safe, of course. And before we get into the episode, once again, just one quick reminder about Day by Design, my online course and coaching program that is launching January 10th. If you haven't signed up to get on the wait list to get notified and obviously get enrolled, I'm going to leave the link in the show notes. It's literally my pride and joy. It's an unbelievable program leveraging my background as an educator. I like to think I do a pretty good job at teaching. So definitely take a look at that. And we're going to ultimately in that course go through ritual design in and out. But we're going to teach you guys how to set proper goals, go over, and set domains for your life, which, what is that? Well, we go into it looking at all the obstacles in the way, looking at all the technology that helps you, talking about how do we plan our week and how do we implement capture strategies and a whole lot more. So I'm really, really excited. Definitely sign up to get notified, and hopefully I'll see you in there. And we will be holding, ultimately, in the beginning of that launch period, we will be holding a workshop. And that's where you're going to get notified of that workshop if you sign up. A very, very cool workshop that kind of introduces you to how to create your own ritual design. So if you come to that workshop, you will get your own first ritual design set in stone. We're going to do it together. So without further ado, let's get into some examples of the CDP framework. Basically, the first that I want to talk about, and this is going to be a lot about, obviously, my own experiences in my life. I think that's the best thing I can, pretty much the only thing I can come at you with. I mean, granted, we can talk about decisions that, pro athletes have made. What did Tiger Woods do? What did the president do? I mean, all of these famous people that have these decisions, both good and bad, that they've made are very public, and we get that, right? But the context is lost on the choice that really they were presented with. We always go back and talk about Jordan and how he was presented with a choice when he was cut from the high school basketball team. He had the choice of whether to continue down this road or not, and he did. But that decision that he made had to be made every single time he woke up early to shoot 500, free throws or whatever, right? So that's where this the intricacy of this kind of comes out. So I'll talk to you about a couple of things in my life that I think I can provide more context around. The one I think is actually fairly interesting because it's the only thing that I can point to in this gentleman's life is my stepdad. My stepdad, we used to smoke like a chimney. He was that guy. He was actually a mechanic and still is, race car driver. You'd always see him working on the car and have a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Smoked for years and years and years. And one day he quit. And he quit cold turkey, which I found very interesting. And I never really paid attention to it until later in life. And the story that he tells, which who knows how true it is, the story that he tells is that one day he bought an entire pack of cigarettes and he went to go light one up and he looked at this and said, well, this is stupid, and threw the whole pack of fresh cigarettes that he just bought in the garbage and never smoked again. Now, I believe that he never smoked again because I lived with him in that period and I never once seen him smoke a cigarette. I never once caught him smoking a cigarette, trying to smoke behind her back or whatever. And I commend him for that. Now, the interesting thing is that there's a lot to unpack there, right? So we'll go into the details. Now, every single time, what happened was he started this cycle backwards. He started where he had ultimately a habit, right? Really an addiction, but a bad pattern that was developing of becoming a smoker for his entire life. And then he was faced with the decision, whether or not, really the choice to make the decision, whether or not he is going to continue putting, say, in my mom's case, she had asthma. I technically have a little bit of asthma too. Very slight these days. Am I going to continue to put them at risk? And am I going to continue to waste money? And am I going to continue maybe to put my health at risk? Of course, but I think that was lower on his priority list. And when you look at this, he had multiple factors, multiple positive factors that were pushing him towards making the decision to quit. Now, that's the first scenario here. The second scenario is that he had a choice presented to himself every single time for years and years after that. And I know that because I remember him all the time chewing gum and chewing on toothpicks. So that was his way of dealing with the urges, the physical urges that came out, right? That he wanted to smoke. So every time that he was presented with a choice of whether or not to start smoking again, he every single time made a positive decision, which is very rare. And it's very, very rare, but I think it's also, it's a lot of positive decisions, positive factors that helped him along. And at the same time, I think that's kind of also his personality. So he's very kind of like cut and dry, and that's like that. Okay, that's it. So I think there was a few things there, but that is a perfect example of a lot of people that have patterns, have developed into habits, that have developed into addictions, whether it's smoking, drinking, drugs, depending on how physically addicted you are. And mentally, you might be able to be the only intervention that you need. So ultimately, there is some decisions there that he has made. He has had to make over time, and a lot of the times, we talked about in the last episode where the decisions can be made in the future. So you can decide that I am no longer a smoker. That is it. Again, you're going to always presented with the moment choice and the in the moment decision, but that's one situation. Now, I'm going to tell you this story, and I was debating whether or not to tell you this story, but I think it's important, and I think it's a very good example about the choices that are sometimes hidden. And so back in March of 2020, when, depending on when you're listening to this, was the initial outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. For the last couple of years, my mom was getting back into horseback riding. She was 67 years old, which is pretty impressive. She used to ride for 20 or so years. She owned her own horse. She used to show all the time. She was really, really incredible. And she started getting back into it. And I was very, very impressed. Slow, easygoing stuff. And we all were getting kind of nervous in March, with the pandemic really rolling into the U.S. And we knew ultimately that things were going to start shutting down. And she had a choice to make. And she had a choice of whether or not to go riding at the barn one last time before it shut down. And she, in her mind, thought she would never be able to get back on the horse, because if it shuts down for a long time, then she's going to get out of shape of what she was, and that'd be it. And she had the choice to make of whether or not to do that or not. And so she did, and we believe that that's where she contracted the virus. And on May 19th, 2020, she passed away from COVID. And I don't mean to be a bummer in the beginning of the new year here, but I think I never really gone into much detail about this, and I really couldn't until this point. And I think it's important that I put it out in the public, because I think it's an example that no matter how much we have these frameworks and systems into place, we can only make our best decisions, and we can only do the best we can. And the choices sometimes are unclear that we have. My mom thought she was making a choice of whether or not to go to the barn one last time before it shut down, because she thought she would never be able to ride again. What she did not realize was how contagious this virus was. And she did not realize that the choice she was making was to go riding one last time, and that would be the last time, no matter what. And it's very interesting, because I think back to when I was in, say, high school, and I was a wild man. I made very bad decisions. I did some wild things, sketching on the back of cars, trucks. I mean, crazy stuff. And ultimately, the decision what I was making was to thrill seek and risk my life, or not thrill seek and be safe. And obviously my mom wasn't trying to thrill seek. She was just trying to get into the hobby, and one of the few things in her life that gave her a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. And I'm not really sure where else I'm going with this. I just think that it's a good example of choices that are sometimes unclear. And again, the details are unclear. I mean, we know that 5 other people at the barn got COVID, and she didn't go she didn't go anywhere else, and no one came over. And so it was the only place that probably happened. Either way, it's a good example of choices that sometimes are unclear, and we can only do what we can only do. The next thing I want to talk to you about, and again, not to hopefully get off of the depression wagon here, I want to talk to you a little bit about the way I handled that, and the way my grief, my road to recovery, and the road I'm always going to be on for the rest of my life, obviously. But the grief process for losing my mom, I had many, many choices and decisions and patterns that started to develop specifically within the first 12 months. First year was very interesting. For a bulk of that year, the way that I dealt with my grief was through anger. I was extremely angry. And I will always be a little angry because I have my reasons, but very, very angry and dangerously angry because I was putting not only myself in harm, my wife in harm, but my unborn daughter at harm. It was crazy timing, but we basically just found out we were pregnant at that moment. So, the anger that ensued was never directed at them, of course, but it was at all of the things that were going on in the world, and the fact that I couldn't go a day without being shoved down my throat of someone's opinion of my mom's death. Right? I mean, that's literally what it was. So every time I had to drive through a protest of this or a conversation of that and whatever, and it's anything, and it's still going on. Every time I had a choice whether or not I was going to go up to that person or people and pick a fight, or I was going to ignore it, or I was going to have empathy for them. Maybe they're going through something. I don't know. I have no idea, but I had so many choices every single day. It was incredibly overwhelming, and it still kind of is. I just have I've developed a good pattern, and I'll get into it. So basically, the pattern that started developing was, holding in my emotions, holding it, and then unleashing on, whatever, a specific either moment or person or whatever it is. And that there was a pattern that was developing. And I believe that the circumstances around my daughter's birth and there's timing and even down to the little birthmark that is in the exact same spot that I have, we feel like it was one hell of a blessing from my mom and a gift from my mom. And I think if I continue to think like that, I think she knew what I was going through. And she knew that this was the only thing maybe that was going to get me out of this. Because I'm forced to. Every day, I'm forced to be the best version of myself for her. I can't not be. I just can't. I can't. She's too precious and perfect not to be as happy as I need to be for her. It's a very weird feeling, but it's it's my job. And I have every day I'm presented with a choice in the moment, and how I'm going to decide to act and to be, and how I'm going to show her to be. And granted, she's not even a year yet, but she's closing in on it, but she's learning a lot. She's picking up on a lot. So thankfully, the new pattern that has arisen is one of contentment. And there's a lot of other personal things that I don't really have to get into, but how I'm dealing with, obviously, my mom's next chapter and our own mortality and how this all ties together and all that stuff. So it's a very holistic process, but it is a very helpful for me that this new pattern has arisen. And I've got obviously give a lot of thanks to a lot of people that have, helped me through and of course my wife, I can't forget her. But so a lot of times choices and the decisions we make are realized in moments of crisis, whether it be a loss of a family member, whether it be a realization that I'm overweight, whether it is a doctor tells you have cancer, whether it's many other examples where crisis comes knocking at the door and you say, whoa, okay, I have to make better decisions. I can either do this or this. I'm going to start doing this so then I can develop this habit and this habit, right? So that's ultimately enough of the sad coffee talk here. But I'm going to give you one more example, and this is a much more positive example, and this is my career shift. And my career shift from being a music teacher from where I went to into digital marketing at the time, it is a very interesting one. I had many, many circumstances where and it's kind of like sunk costs, right? Like when you are going to school and you decide in high school you want to be something and you want to be a lawyer, and then you go to however many tremendous amount of years of law school, you go to, obviously you get your bachelor's degree and you go to law school, and you realize you get a job as, I'm not familiar with I'm not familiar with this world here, but you land a job as a lawyer, say, or whatever, and you realize, oh man, this is not what I want to do at all. But you decide every single day just to continue down this path because you've already invested too much time and too much energy into changing. That is, that's often what we do with careers because we feel like we have such there's no way to go around it. And a lot of that has to do with obviously college. We spend a ridiculous amount of money for tuition that we feel like we're already in so much debt. We have to make the decision when we're 17 years old. And if it's the wrong decision, well, it doesn't matter because that's all I have money for. So I understand that. I was in the situation where I got out of school and I was trying my hardest to land a job that would stick and a job that I enjoyed. And I had kind of a situation of sunk costs, right? And I needed to stay in the music world because I already did this. So then I gave my hand at becoming an actual performer, like a professional euphonium player. And that's when I went to study at the Royal Liège Conservatory in Belgium. And I came back and I was like, okay. And I was really thinking through this process. I'm like, all right, if I'm going to be a classical euphonium player, whatever that means, that is an extremely limited situation. Like, really? I'm really an entrepreneur. I have to make my own way at this. There's no symphony orchestra that doesn't even exist. The instrument it's not even played in orchestras. So what do I do? How do I make money? I mean, okay, I'm really I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a businessman, right? Because I can use music as my leverage. So anyway, I went into developing a business around music, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with business. I fell in love with sales, marketing, digital marketing specifically, the idea that you can reach the entire world from the comfort of your own home or from wherever for that point. And that just struck a chord. I was just blown away, and I fell in love immediately, maybe more so than I ever loved music, which is like wild, right? And that's probably a stretch because music is such a part of my identity. I can't even really tell you how much. It's not like I love it. It's like it's me. That's when I am a musician. So, but fell in love with digital marketing. What happened was, through building a business at the time, Breakthrough Music, I became pretty good at digital marketing. I learned how to create and execute Facebook ads and Instagram ads. I learned how to create content. Obviously, I learned how to build websites. I learned how, SEO strategies, SEM strategies. I learned how to podcast. I learned all these different things that it was really just for me. And then I realized, wait a minute, I have this new skill set. The problem is I have no credentials. Uh-oh. But then I realized, thankfully, this new skill set is in a world where credentials is very... You can enter this world with no credentials. Many other fields you can't, but this one, no one really cares too much about where you went to college, or if you didn't go to college, can you make my business money? And once I realized that, I decided that I was worthy enough to try and enter this new field in the private sector of business as a digital marketer. And sure enough, I got a job as basically a solopreneur's next, second-hand man, if you will, running an American like men's apparel type of brand. And I got a couple other jobs. I got a fairly decent job selling digital marketing services to local brick and mortar businesses. And my recent job, I got hired for Cars.com, being a performance manager for Dealer Inspire for dealerships' websites. And, the last few jobs that I've had were really serious jobs, like real jobs, like real salary, 401k, health benefits, everything. And what happened was I look at this now and I say, wow, like I remember what I thought. I remember the fears that I had when I first transitioned and I first made the decision in the future to say, I am done with teaching. I'm done, right? I made a future decision because I kept having the choice to keep applying and keep searching and keep networking and keep going down this road of music. And it's been how many goddamn years and I haven't been able to benefit from this. I'm done. I decided, right? So then ultimately the pattern that arose was me getting skilled and retooling myself as a digital marketer. And that's it. And I'm telling you, I can think about every situation in my life that this framework has not only applied to, but now that I've realized it, now that I've dissected it, it's really powerful. Because what I find myself now doing is I find myself deciding to take action on any type of idea that I have, any little thing, any little new thought process, any type of new concept that I have, I take action immediately. One of this, hopefully down the road, one of the legs of this business will actually be speaking. And I'm going to be putting a lot of this into workshops in person and probably working with kids, with high school kids, because specifically with this framework, actually, it's very important for them to learn this. So when I was thinking about that, I immediately called some of my teacher friends and I was like, and then I was like, okay, I'm too soon, but I want to tell you about this. And I just get the ball rolling. And that's a decision that I've been making to start to take action on anything that I think I want to do, because the worst case scenario is when we're sitting on an idea and, it dies with us. We don't want that. We always want to put everything that we have into this world out there. So that was a lot. Sorry. But this episode is important, and it's not just to tell you my sob stories and my successes and my family and all that. It's to hopefully make you realize that this is just one man's perspective. It's just one man's point of view of this framework. So now what I need you to do is I need you to jump in the comments section, and I want you to tell me a situation where the CDP framework has not only applied to your life, but maybe a way that you can leverage it in the future to realize that you even have the choice in the future. In the first place, you have the choice. You are not who you are now. You are who you are who you can decide to be tomorrow. That's so powerful. That's like the thing. So you make the decision and you develop patterns and develop habits and get to yourself in a new position, right? If your ritual design is not working and you skip your AM routine and you skip your BW routine, you skip your PM routine, it's because you have a choice whether or not to execute it or not. The not is probably because you're doing something else. You're either sleeping in, or you're eating the ice cream, or you're watching TV, or whatever it is. But you have that choice. You have to make the decision. And you can. You have the power to. That's what's so amazing. And how many times are you going to make that right decision that you want to? Is it going to develop a pattern that benefits you or that hinders you? It's completely up to you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it if you really liked it. Ultimately, if you got some value from it, please leave a review. That would help me tremendously and would help everybody else find the podcast. That will definitely get this in the ears of more listeners. So thank you so much once again. Have a wonderful, wonderful new year. Enjoy yourself tomorrow. Be safe. And we're going to have some really good things coming up in next week and the next few weeks after with the launch of Day by Design. If you haven't signed up already, definitely do so. And I will see you soon. Thank you so much once again for tuning into the Upgrade My Rituals podcast.